This episode of Positivity with Paul is dedicated to the Center for Addiction and Mental Health Foundation in Toronto. CAMH is leading the charge to break down stigma and discover the causes and cures for mental illness in Canada and around the world. With your generous donations to CAMH, we can allow more people to access the help they need. For more information on how to donate, please visit the link below. Hi everyone, this is Paul Kandola, and welcome to another episode of Positivity with Paul, where I find fellow actuaries, pun intended, for a conversational Q&A on their life. The focus is on their journey along the actuarial exam path and beyond, some of the challenges they faced, and how those challenges shaped them to become who they are today. To give some brief context on becoming an actuary, there's a number of actuarial exams that one has to go through. These exams are very rigorous, and typically only the top 40% pass at each sitting. They cover complex mathematical topics like statistics and financial modeling, along with insurance, investments, regulatory, and accounting. Candidates can study up to 5 months per sitting, and it usually takes around 7 to 10 years on average to earn their fellowship degree. To that end, I launched this series of podcasts because I was curious about what drove my guests to surmount trials and tribulations to get to the end goal of becoming an actuary. There's unfortunately no real easy or unique path to become an actuary. So by that, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Choquet, a fellow executive member of the Actuarial Club of Toronto, the chair of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee of the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, and a member of the World Community for Christian Meditation. He's a fellow of both the Society of Actuaries, the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, and a chartered investment manager from the Canadian Securities Institute. He's currently a director of client portfolio management at Russell Investments in Toronto. In this podcast, Andre reminisces over his personal experiences on his journey to become a fellow actuary, his passion for the challenge that is climate change, and how he learned to carry on after a mental illness diagnosed at age 24, along with his disciplined and practical approach to mental and physical health, and a conversation about the fruits of meditation and urgency of knowing oneself in these unprecedented times. Hope you enjoy this eclectic discussion. All right, well, we're here, episode 2, Positivity with Paul. Andre, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, Paul. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here as well. Looking forward to a number of topics we're going to cover today. First, in terms of the work that you do, and yeah, just tell us a little bit about that in terms of how you went about becoming an actuary and what interested you.
Yeah. Well, where can I start? I mean, seems a long time ago, but I guess I first heard about actuarial science when I was in high school, grade 10. My math teacher at the time, she told me about this profession, which was a little bit exclusive and paid well, and you had to be good in math, and you're pretty much, guaranteed to get a job after university. So it all rang true to me, and I thought, well, that's great. I'll inquire more about that. And one thing led to another, and I got into actuarial science. I didn't do a lot of research. I just, felt that this was a good way to go. It was like math, but not pure math. It was applied math, applied to real life practical problems, which is what I like about actuarial science the most. Really feel like we're helping society, solve a lot of the major issues, and including now I'm involved in climate change. So I think a lot of actuaries can do a positive contribution to either fight or manage climate change. So my role now, as you said, I started out as a pension actuary, but I moved over to the investment side. So I'm both a FCIA, FSA, but also a chartered investment manager. And I work at an asset management firm called Russell Investments, and I basically help pension plan sponsors and endowment sponsors, foundations, develop strategies to meet their goals. And then at the end of the day, money in the big institutions are meant to be used to meet liabilities, whether it's pensioners' payments or spending for foundations to meet universities' expenses, operating expenses, for example.
Was math your favorite subject in high school? Like when you started to learn about it, being an actuary, was that your favorite subject, or were you just good at it?
Uh, I guess both. Yeah, I was good at it from an early age in high school, and I really enjoyed it. I like the order, the certainty of mathematical equations, and but I also liked the chemistry. I didn't like physics too much, and English also. I remember a teacher in high school who all he did at each English classes. I was going to like a French school, but he came to an English class with a piece of art or a poem, and we would spend the whole class discussing like Guernica from Picasso or E. E. Cummings, English poet, or various other pieces of art. And I thought it was fantastic how he would, make us speak English and by discussing great art at the same time. So I thought it was brilliant.
Did they incorporate the math that's behind the art as well? You always hear about the golden ratio, how it's always included in all these beautiful artworks and things that there's some mathematical equation too that's innate in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Math and art, I more found it in my study of music. When I finished my, oh no, I wasn't finished with my exams, but when I moved to the Caribbean, actually, I lived in the Caribbean for 5 years and was unemployed at the beginning, so I learned the guitar and started playing guitar with my guitar teacher. We would play at jazz clubs and play jazz standards in front of audiences, and but I also learned like Bach music is very very mathematical, and there's like a series involved in the writing of his music, and so I was always fascinated by the link between math and music.
For sure, Beethoven, I think it was Symphony Number Five. Just the way that the chords sort of reflect one another, but in just different wavelengths. It really is amazing mathematically, and obviously musically as well. Uh,
There you go. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, for sure. I wanted to walk back sort of your exam process. Now that we've gone through the light, we've seen the light at the end of the tunnel. Um, kind of wanted to just play us back where uh, how did it feel when you had that first exam that was a five or less? And what did you learn from it? And how did you go about to recover from it and persevere to get to that end goal?
Yes, very good question, because a failure is part of the process at the end of the day. I think if you don't fail in certain things in life, you don't learn much. Um, or fail, the word fail is actually an acronym for first attempt in learning. Fail, first attempt in learning. So
Oh,
remember
okay.
that. It's a good way to see the word fail. Yeah, I passed through my first set of exams, the multiple choice exams, associateship exams fairly easily. I didn't really fail. I don't think I failed any of them actually. So I started failing more with the long answer questions of the other exams, and yeah, it's of course it's heartbroken after you spend 3 months, 4 months studying to get a five. Um, and one thing I learned is I learned the hard way, because one exam actually, I remember it's P460, I think. It's a pension exam in actuarial cost methods. And I failed it 4 times. So I wrote it 5 times. And it's only at the end that I realized that needed to change something. Like if you fail an exam and you study the same text and same methods and you follow the same pattern, the results is likely going to be the same. That's what I realized. So around the end, around for the last one, I started doing things differently. I started doing like using cue cards, using posters that I would put on my wall. So try to use all my senses in order to absorb the material for the exam. So recordings and then play the recordings in my head. So and also I realized that the way I was answering questions was not the right way. I was sometimes, because I had just started working at the time at my first employment at Mercer, I thought that I will display stuff that I know from my work, and thinking that it will give me more points. And at the end of the day, you got to make sure you hit the main points of each topic. You have main points and you have sub points. So the main points are worth more in terms of points. So if there's 5 main points, just hit the 5 main points before getting into the sub points. And so actually, there's a paper that I remember reading from the Society of Actuaries. It was a transcript from a meeting in the early 90s. And I did ask the SOA to research it. So hopefully they'll find it for me and you can post it. But it was all about that. It was about, how to succeed in actuarial exams. And they were explaining how basically you got to answer what the marker is asking you. So don't try to be smart. Don't try to be, super, show off. Just hit the main points all the time. That's how you get past.
You also brought up the is it the mnemonics?
Oh yeah.
Application? Yeah.
Mnemonics application, yeah. So mnemonics are basically tools to help you retain, like lists, for example. We have a lot of lists in our material, as you know. Well, like the word fail, I told you, like that's a mnemonics in a way, like first attempt in reading. So you could take the first letter of each list and then make up a sentence or a word that will help you remember that list during the exam, for example.
Yeah, that's great. And something that I learned as well was that like similar but different was flashcards, having those deluxe flashcards to specifically zone in on the questions that maybe we're having trouble answering or having like trouble just to absorb it. And a lot of it did include mnemonics as well for some sort of order to like have that memorized, since it isn't a math equation.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, try to make it dynamic and make it not just sitting down at your desk and trying to retain information, but yeah, put yourself in a questioner, like the person who will write the questions, put yourself in their shoes and imagine questions and make up answers, right, basically.
Yeah, amazing. In terms of in terms of the whole climate change initiative, that's a huge part for actuaries as well. One of the things that kind of underlines the whole actuarial community is sort of solve issues that public might not see up front. It's sort of similar, analogous to a seatbelt that folks wear. You don't know who created the seatbelt or invented it. You just wear it for safety. If, an accident happens, you're protected. The folks who would, obviously, first line paramedics, they're the real heroes when something happens after the fact. But to prevent things, that's a huge initiative on its own, like kind of forward thinking on issues that may occur. So obviously climate change, it's a sort of like a global contingency effect, right?
Yes.
So in terms of, it's really interesting too. I was reading a Bill Gates book recently, the impact of climate change. And
Okay.
yeah, I was interested for I guess the mission of the CIA, the climate change initiative, how that goes about, what the approach is for
Right, right.
tackling such a big phenomena.
No. And it wasn't always easy. I mean, the CIA, the first, like, I should say, I'm the chair of the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee of the CIA, but the people before me had a bit of a hard time, convincing fellow actuaries that we should be involved in measuring climate change risks or involved in even making pronouncements about climate change, the fact that it was real, the fact that it was man-made, and things like that. So kudos to them. And but now our committee is well established, well recognized. There's about 20 of us from all the practices, property, casualty, life insurance, pensions, and investments. And I guess our mandate is first education, so provide more PD opportunities for actuaries to get knowledgeable about climate change in general, how it develops, and also climate change risks, which are basically transition risks. So these are risks linked to the transition of the economy from where it is now to a net zero economy, and then physical risks from climate change disasters, weather patterns, and also legal risks. So potential legal risks from fiduciaries not taking initiatives soon enough. So basically, so like I said, our mandate is to provide education, to also be pioneer of research in the field of climate change. So for example, personally, I'm into developing metrics, climate change metrics that would be forward-looking as opposed to backward-looking. Forward-looking, trying to assess the impact of climate change on a pension plan, for example, or an insurance company. And also raise awareness in the general public about how actuaries are involved in climate change. So this is the main thing. But the thing about climate change risks that is different from mortality risk or from other risks that we're studying as actuaries is that as actuaries we're used to take a whole bunch of data and develop models and do some predictive analysis using past data. But for climate change, we don't really have past data. This is a new phenomenon. So we're relying more on climate change scenarios. So looking at possible scenarios for the future. You always have blue sky, gray sky, and middle of the road scenario, and try to calculate risks associated with each of those scenarios. So we're going to work with regulators as well. We just issued a response to OSFI's consultation on climate change. So they basically send a consultation to asset owners, insurance companies, and us to ask for our advice and views on this. So I see us as a profession working with regulators in the future to basically help them collect information and also monitor and insurance companies and pension plans.
So, one analogy that Bill Gates gave for the whole climate change phenomenon was just a tub that's running water, where the water coming up is carbon. So, even if it's dripping, at some point it's going to overflow. That's why it's the importance of having that net zero just to stop that flow.
Yeah, but there's always another side of the coin. I mean, we can be focused on net zero and focus on greenhouse gases and keeping the level of CO2 in the atmosphere below 450 parts per million. That's fine, but if you just focus on that, you might ignore other things that are detrimental for the planet. So, for example, like all our cell phones, these cell phones, they contain minerals, what they call rare minerals. Not rare because they're not in abundance. It's rare because it's really difficult to extract them from the planet. So it takes a lot of resources, energy, and there's byproduct. There's like waste that comes out of the mines. And often those mines are in, developing countries. So you might have a cell phone thinking you're neat, you're great for the planet, but at the same time, down on the other side of the planet, there's some poor peasant paying for this by living in pollution and waste. So just saying this to bring the spotlight on the biosphere. A lot more actuaries in the UK, for example, are talking about the human impact on the biosphere, which is also something we have to keep an eye on. So it's not just gas emission, it's also impact on the planet.
Right. There was, I think, a number of 51 billion tons of carbon or emissions that we're looking to get to zero, which sounds like a huge amount. And just visualizing that 51 billion and how that's split up, and obviously, products having these electronic devices is a huge part of that portion. Cement, having cement as
Yes.
well.
Cement
It's a
production, yeah.
chemical equation where the byproduct is calcium and carbon dioxide naturally,
Yeah.
which and I think there obviously deforestation and meat eating a lot of meat too. So seems like it's both a top down and bottom up approach. Top down, obviously educating folks, uh, maybe some green premiums that are put in or subsidies for companies that put these clean initiatives out, clean energy initiatives. Hopefully,
Yeah.
from a bottom up, I guess from in terms of the normal folk that's just working. Uh, is there obviously just reusing, reducing, recycling as much as you can, composting? Not one thing I realized when I was in Vancouver is that uh, there's not a lot of composting that happens in such a green city, which is
Oh,
I
really?
found
Okay.
surprising. Yeah, like things like that. I guess from a bottom-up approach, you look at it and see how things could potentially change. Trying to, but there is a lot of things that need to change to get there if we're looking by 2050. But I think they said during COVID, obviously there's been less travel, globally with planes, cars, and that carbon emissions been reduced by 5% from this experiment, right? If you want to call it. So yeah, that's to put that in numbers too, in factors of this big change that we had for the last year and the reduction of CO2 emissions.
Yeah, but there's some CEOs that are saying that you're going to need like that type of impact every year until 2050. So they're saying economically, it's it's either not sustainable or very very difficult to attain, right? So yeah, you're right. There's been some decrease in terms of gas emissions, but it has to go on even more. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on, wanted to talk about more personal endeavors as well. Yeah, last time we spoke, you were training for a triathlon
Hmm.
before the pandemic hit. Did you do that triathlon or was it?
Uh, yes, yes, I was happy to complete this triathlon. That was I guess 2 years ago. It was the Toronto Triathlon, and yeah, I guess I'm the type of person that I like to challenge myself with new challenges once in a while. So, well, I mentioned the playing the guitar in a duo in front of an audience. That was quite challenging, and I have a small win also. I learned to use my mouse. I'm a right-handed, so I used to use my house with the right hand. Now I've learned to use it with my left hand. That way I can write with my right hand while I'm using my mouse. So, and also it trains
Well,
another part of your brain. So that's my little claim to fame. Um, but yeah, a triathlon. I used to do triathlons when I was younger, in my early 20s, and just thought that as a challenge, I want to see if I could get back into doing triathlons. So and I succeeded. So as soon as everything opens up, I'll probably do it again. Yeah.
Sure. So in terms of the training for it, was it every day was a different activity, or would you train it, you know, 5 minutes swimming, 5 minutes running, 5 minutes biking, and then extending it that way, like scaling it up, sort of thing?
Yeah, it's more like every day I focus on one of the three. So no, I never really in the training part I don't really do one day like more than one an activity. So, but I try to increase the speed or the reduce the time for each one of them. Yeah.
Nice. Just wanted to get an idea for what sort of uh, uh, factors are included in the pension space.
Yeah. So I was always interested in the investment side of things, even though I started in the pension track. But in my days when I did my actuarial exams, there was no investment track. There were some investment exams offered as electives, and so I did as much as I could on the elective side of things to learn about investments. And yeah, so I mean, as pension actuaries, you value liabilities, but at the same time, it's important that somebody has an overall view of the assets and the liabilities because they all move sometimes in tandem, sometimes not in tandem. So it's important in order to help your client meet their goals. It's important to manage both together. And it wasn't always the case. There was a time when assets were managed more from a total return point of view. So trying to achieve the highest return with the lowest level of risk, and risk was defined as standard deviation of returns. So it was totally ignoring the liabilities. That was in the early 90s. So after a few, market crisis and dot-com crisis and 2008 crisis, so there's been a lot more emphasis on managing both together. And managing both together means projecting in the future under, lots of economic scenarios, both assets and liabilities. And actuaries are more trained to do that than CFAs. With all due respect to my CFA colleagues, I believe that actuaries have more knowledge of how cash flows, are moving relative to various interest rates and inflation and other discount rates. So for that purpose, that's why there's a lot more actuaries involved in asset liability modeling, which is what I was doing when I was when I first started moving on into the investment track. I started, being part of what was at the time like a practice that was a bridge between the pension and the investments. So we were modeling liabilities and assets for consultants. And yeah, but I mean, it doesn't mean I think actuaries can be well also totally involved in on the investment side if they want to. Again, because of our knowledge of mathematics of discounting and cash flows and things like that. Because a lot of companies are valued, for example, some stocks are valued using a dividend discount model where they discount future dividends and value the stocks like that. So nothing prevents actuaries from being involved on the investment side as well.
Right. And in terms of the factors that get in play, so obviously interest rate is a huge phenomenon, just to give a perspective, I think the interest rate was around 18% in the 80s, and
Hmm.
now we're hovering at around like 2%.
Yeah.
And obviously, like no one has a crystal ball to see what this rate is, and given the inflation as well, is this interest rate uh, is it really positive? Like we usually assume a positive interest rate doing the models, right? And with the real interest rate, what could potentially be negative. How does that impact the
Hmm.
models? That, yeah, that's more of a question. I don't know the answer to, or I don't know if anyone does.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, these days the models show that yields on government bonds are not going to be greater than 2% for the next 10 years. So, and you're right. So with inflation, if inflation is 2%, then we're gonna have negative yields. So that's why a lot of plans now are looking at other ways of generating income and returns instead of bonds, because again, they need to meet their liabilities going forward. So they're looking into adding more credit, corporate bonds, and maybe some lower credit bonds, like lower than AA bonds, lower than what we call investment grade bonds, for example, or even integrating global credit and other asset-backed securities or commercial-backed securities as well. So again, various ways of integrating more returns. And on the return-seeking side, infrastructure and real estate are definitely asset classes that are being considered more and more by institutional funds, whether they're listed securities listed on the markets or direct ventures.
Awesome. In terms of your own personal, obviously, investments is what you do as a career. How about personally, as an investment? What's been your best investment, or what your most memorable investment that you made?
Well, financial investments, I would say real estate. So I was one of the lucky ones that got into the Toronto real estate market in 2002. So I benefited quite nicely of the surge in the values. But like I'm not the type who will bet too much on picking individual stocks and bonds. I prefer finding a good advisor that I respect and I trust, and I let him or her do the job. I think that for your viewers, what I would recommend is investments on yourself. So not necessarily financial, although it could lead to financial benefits down the road, but definitely investments in improving your skills, finding wisdom outside of just actuarial science. I did during the pandemic last year. I did a program called Lifebook. It's about it's a plan that allows you to develop. It's almost like companies have a marketing plan or business plan for the future. So this is like a self-plan for the future, and in different areas of your life, character, money, career, but also religion or spiritual, and love, and like there's like 12 categories like that, where it's a 6 weeks program where you really zone in on how you want each categories to look like in the future. So you end up with a massive plan for your future that you just need to implement that, and after that, down the road.
Is it based on projected cash flows as well? That's cool.
Well, the money part, the career part involves, they do recommend, creating a financial plan. So creating a plan for the future. I have one myself as well. Projecting my needs in the future and my assets and my income and things like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend every person should have a financial plan as well, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's great to hear another part of the coin for this, because yeah, in terms of the investment sides, there's always so much information out there, and um, different people, and yeah, a lot of it is commission based. So obviously, this isn't commission based or
Yeah,
anything. So
and tax, you have to consider tax. Actuaries are not that well trained in using tax in their plans, because a lot of us work in the non-tax environment of pension plans, right? Tax registered plans. But there's a whole bunch of people out there that are looking at investments from a tax effectiveness point of view, which could be important too.
for
And I
sure,
also
for sure.
believe that there's no. I don't believe in holding cash too much. I think there's always, depending on whatever the market is, I think there's assets to be invested in. It's a matter of doing your research and And like Warren Buffett said, buy a stock the way you would buy a house. Understand and like it such that you'd be content to own it in the absence of any market. So it's always a matter of basically doing your research about what you're going to buy, and including the fees. You're right. That's an important factor.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I wanted also we had a really great conversation on meditation as well, and
Mm.
how that's been incorporated in your life and how it's evolved as well throughout the time. Talk a little about how that's been incorporated throughout.
Yeah. Yeah, meditation, I must say, well, talking about investments earlier, I think that has been the greatest investment in my life. I think it supports everything that I do now. It started out, I must say, because of a challenge or a bit of a dark period in my life. I was diagnosed when I was about 25 with bipolar disorder. So I did take medication for it, but I found that again, you need to open up your eyes to other ways of coping with a challenge. It's not necessarily one thing that will solve everything. So that's why I started reading about the brain and reading about therapies that would basically go beyond just taking medication. So self therapy, positively, the way of thinking positively about life. But meditation is something that I discovered that ended up helping me a lot in my life. And I started 25 years ago as part of when I was living in the Caribbean in Trinidad and Tobago. I attended the School of Philosophy, which is basically a school that looks at the laws of nature, the laws of life, and tries to understand from different traditions. I mean, it's not a religion. We were looking at scriptures from Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity, but that would help us understand, the way the self, and the world we live in. And meditation was a major part of their practice. So that's where I started it. But it was more transcendental meditation, just the recitation of a mantra. But later on, in about 3 years ago, I discovered Christian meditation, which kind of blended well my belief. I mean, I'm Christian and I believe in Christ, and and the meditation itself. So through this discipline, which involves meditating twice a day, 30 minutes a day, 30 minutes every time, I became more understanding of myself, of others. I became more humble, more more patient. Yeah, more understanding of everybody else, and in a way more loving, more compassionate, more appreciative of everything that's around me. And so I definitely recommend it to anybody who has an interest for it and who's always wondered if they're made for it. Even if you start and you feel like you don't have the patience, I would say, try to work with others and try to persevere, because like everything in life, it's not always the easy things that lead to the greatest results. It's sometimes you need to put in a bit of effort into it, but it's worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of the routine, do you do like first thing in the morning, or is this something that's designated at a specific time where you just need time to recharge?
Yeah, it's recommended to do it in the morning and in the evening. The way I interpret it is that in the morning, it kind of like I do it like as soon as I get up from bed. It kind of sets the day. Basically prepares yourself for a day of openness, of gratitude, of basically being alert and ready to take on any challenge. So some people think meditation is passive, but I don't agree. It's very much an activity. it prepares you for the action. So in a way, it's very much a part of the action. I mean, there's a center in the New Mexico called the Center for Contemplation and Action. So they basically do meditation, but they do a lot of also active work to help society around them. And then at the end of the day, it's a bit to close the day, to basically reflect on the activities of the day. If you've done something you're not happy with, it's almost like you're asking for, well, you present it to God and you ask for forgiveness, and God forgives, so you keep on going, right?
For sure. Yeah. The other thing I found beneficial that is having some sort of journal as well in the morning, at night too, to have those thoughts just written down so you're kind of aware of them. A lot of the times you just kind of go about the day and say if you don't, if you're in a rush, you just, kind of holding on to those thoughts that are kind of underlying, but just having that written down and kind of, I don't know if it's called recreating it, but just being aware of it while you're meditating, that these are just thoughts and they come and go, right?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes there's an app called Abide. It's a Christian meditation app, and they have like a prayer every day. And sometimes I listen to that prayer before meditation, and then I go into meditation. Because in meditation, you're not supposed to think about anything. Actually, the purpose is to let go of everything.
Right.
So you just focus on repeating the mantra, and that allows you to let go all your thoughts, all your worries, all the baggage that you have, right?
Right.
And the ego too.
For sure. The mantras, they're more of a positive spin on things to help you throughout the day. I starting with I am, right? Is the
Okay,
mantra
that's good.
is that's how I was taught. I am bold and courageous, or I am this. Is that the same, similar sort of mantras that?
Well, the mantra I use as part of the World Christian meditation community, it's pronounced Maranatha, and Maranatha is an Aramaic word. So Aramaic is the language that Jesus spoke, and it means "Come, Lord." Um, but it's not far from I am, because I am is also in the Bible. That's how the Lord God, when Moses asked God how to name him, and he said, I am that I am. So I am is also has a God, you know, relationship.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I guess, and so in terms of like if you were to have a uh, if you were to go back to your 25-year-old self and with all your wisdom and knowledge that you've come with now, what sort of advice would you give?
Um, yeah, that's a very good question. Um, I would basically say that you have to trust your heart. You have to trust yourself. So even if somebody's giving you an advice, an adult, somebody who looks very knowledgeable and things like that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's your life. So you should follow your own heart, your own voice. And and in life, I say, just love people, even if they don't love you. I mean, I think that's the best way to go about in life, is to love people, even if they don't love you, because living with hate and anger, it's just going to lead you to negative feelings and disaster down the road, especially if you accumulate anger all your life. I mean, that's why you see some older people are very grumpy and angry all the time, because they just accumulated it. So don't do that.
I like it. Do you have a favorite book that you fall back to that you sort of find yourself going back to reference or? recommend?
Well, the Bible for sure. It's my number one book. I think it's a book of psychology, of self-improvement, of so many things. It's unbelievable what's in that book. And even if the Old Testament doesn't sound too positive, it's still it's still there for a reason. It still has a lesson to give. But otherwise, I would say in the nonfiction world, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl is a survivor of the genocide, the Jewish genocide, and he's the founder of what we call logotherapy. So logotherapy is the study of meaning in life. And what he realized while he was in concentration camp is that those who didn't have a meaning, even if it was a simple meaning of I don't know, helping others with their work, those who didn't have a meaning were the ones who would disappear fairly quickly. Those who survived the genocide ended up having a meaning in life. So I like examples of people who have come across great barriers, great difficulties, and who've made it. So any survivors of genocide and the Armenian genocide, which we don't hear much about. My wife is Armenian. Armenian genocide is the same thing. It was in 1915 to 1918. The Armenians at the end of the Turk government at the time. So atrocities, like human atrocities, like you would never believe it, happened during those times. But still, some Turks ended up, helping some Armenians, and some Armenians ended up alive. So in the fiction world, Sophie's World, it's the story of a young girl, a Norwegian teenager, who is introduced to the history of philosophy by a middle-aged philosopher. But there's a middle part in the book that is fantastic. I like it a lot. So it teaches about philosophy, but there's a spiritual element also in that book, Sophie's World. So these are my two books.
Awesome. I like it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, any other closing remarks that if you have for the viewers? I know we went through a lot. We just sort of scratched the surface to probably go for another hour or so. But yeah, in terms,
I guess the message for now, the times we're in now. I mean, this is a difficult period. As I'm talking, social media talk about like further, imprisonment in our house and increasing numbers of infections and stuff like that. And I would just say that you got to keep your mind focused on no matter what happens around you. Just keep your mind focused on God's will and your plan and what plan God has for you. Your loved ones around you, everybody is in the same boat. So we have to basically help each other go through this, and we'll get through it. Yeah.
Andrea, really thank you. Appreciate your time. Yeah, you're always welcome to come on as you please. And yeah, hope to talk to you soon, and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, well, I want to congratulate Paul on your initiative. I think it's a great idea. Your programs, I hope you continue. I hope people get a lot of benefit out of it. And, there you go. That's your contribution to helping people around you. So
That's it. Yeah, whatever I can do to help people as well. Just we're all going through our own stuff, and like you said, failure is growth.
Yeah.
Anytime you do fail, like that's just another step in the right direction that you're looking to go for in your path, right? Regardless of what it is, like it's not I failed. It's like I just learned another lesson. It's
Yeah,
that's pretty much
exactly. As long as you don't take it personally, and just move on.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Awesome.
Okay,
Well, yeah, thanks again.
great.